Bang, bang, bang. The sound shattered the silence like a gunshot. Sarah jolted upright in bed, her heart racing so violently it felt like it might burst from her chest. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Maybe it was thunder, maybe a car backfiring on the road outside. But then it came again, 3 heavy, deliberate knocks that rattled the thin wooden door of her small house. Sarah's eyes darted toward the clock on her nightstand. 12:03 a.m. No one knocked at this hour, not in a town as quiet as hers. She lived in a sleepy part of Maine, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and where people still left their doors unlocked, at least, most people. But Sarah, being a nurse who worked late shifts at the county hospital, had always been extra cautious. She locked every door and double-checked every window before bed. She sat frozen, straining her ears for another sound. Her house creaked in the wind. A dog barked faintly in the distance. But then, another knock. Louder this time. Bang, bang, bang. Sarah's throat tightened. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe someone needed help. But when the screen lit up, her stomach dropped. No service. Just a hollow little X where the bars should have been. She frowned in disbelief. Her phone always had perfect reception in this neighborhood. Always. Her pulse quickened. She debated calling out, asking who it was, but something inside her told her not to. Something primal. Instead, she slid out of bed, her bare feet whispering against the cool hardwood floor, and tiptoed toward the front door. Each step felt like it echoed through the house. When she reached the door, she pressed her ear against it. At first, there was nothing, just silence. Then, faintly, she heard it, the sound of someone breathing. Slow, heavy, right on the other side. Sarah swallowed hard and leaned toward the peephole. But when she looked, her blood ran cold. No one was there. Her mind scrambled for explanations. Was this a prank? A drunk neighbor? Or worse, someone who wasn't supposed to be here at all? She stepped back slowly, her chest heaving, when she heard it. A voice. Sarah, let me in. Her knees nearly gave out. She wasn't imagining it. Someone had said her name. Her name. The sound was low, raspy, almost like a whisper, but it cut through her bones. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, even though it was useless without service. She didn't answer. She didn't move. But the voice came again, louder this time, more insistent. Sarah, open the door. Her skin prickled. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do anything but open that door. She backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the wood as though it might splinter open at any moment. That was the exact moment Sarah realized something terrifying. Whoever was outside her door knew her name. Sarah, let me in. The words clung to the air like smoke, twisting and curling inside her head. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She staggered backward from the door, her breath shallow, her entire body trembling. Whoever this was, he wasn't just a stranger. He wasn't just knocking on a random house. He knew her name. She pressed her back against the wall, clutching her useless phone. It still showed no service, as if the world outside her house had suddenly gone silent, cut off. Her first thought was to call out, "Who are you? What do you want?" But the words never left her throat. Something about the voice felt wrong. It wasn't just the tone. It wasn't just the timing. It was how calm it sounded, how patient, as though the man on the other side wasn't in any rush. Sarah, the voice whispered again, dragging her name out longer this time, like a serpent tasting the air. I'm waiting. She spun around, trying to steady her thoughts. Her training as a nurse usually helped her stay calm under pressure. She had dealt with screaming patients, bleeding injuries, and frantic families. But nothing in her career had prepared her for this, a stranger outside her home, whispering her name in the dead of night. Sarah crept toward the living room window, careful not to let the old wooden floor creak beneath her feet. She pulled the curtain back an inch and peered outside. The porch was empty. No figure in sight. No shadows moving across the lawn. Just the faint glow of the street lamp down the block, flickering every few seconds like it was about to burn out. She let out a shaky breath. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe the knocking had been real, but the voice. Maybe her brain had filled it in. Maybe she was tired from her long shift at the hospital, and stress was playing tricks on her. But then she heard it again. Clear. Undeniable. Close. Sarah, open the door. This time it wasn't coming from the porch. It was coming from the side of the house, near the window she was standing at. She gasped, stumbling backwards so fast she nearly tripped over the rug. She dropped her phone, the clatter echoing far too loudly in the silence. Panic surged through her chest like ice water. Whoever this was, they weren't standing at the door anymore. They had moved. Her mind raced. How could he know her name? She hadn't lived here long. Just 6 months since she bought the house. She didn't have many visitors, and she barely spoke to the neighbors. The only people who knew her personally were co-workers, and they wouldn't show up like this. No, this wasn't a prank. This wasn't some harmless mistake. This was deliberate. Sarah's gaze darted across the room, searching for anything she could use to defend herself. Her eyes landed on a fireplace poker leaning against the wall. She grabbed it with trembling hands, holding it out in front of her like a shield. The house felt colder now, darker. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound made her flinch. She moved toward the kitchen, trying to stay quiet, but then, tap, tap, tap. She froze. The sound was coming from the window above the sink. Slowly, against every instinct in her body, she turned her head. And that's when she saw it. A face, pale, expressionless, pressed against the glass. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There, through the faint reflection of her own terrified face in the kitchen glass, was another face. Pale, gaunt, lifeless. His skin looked almost gray under the moonlight, stretched too tightly across his cheekbones. His eyes, they were the worst part. Wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on hers. Sarah dropped to the floor, crawling backward until her spine hit the cabinet. Her fingers clenched the fireplace poker so hard her knuckles turned white. She didn't want to look again, but something inside her forced her to. She lifted her eyes slowly. The window was empty. The face was gone. Her chest heaved, dragging in shallow, panicked breaths. She scrambled to her feet and darted to the back door. It was still locked. She checked it twice, yanking on the handle. Locked. She whirled around, rushing from window to window, pulling at the latches, making sure everything was secure. She didn't care about the noise anymore. Fear had taken over every rational thought. But the silence that followed was somehow worse. Sarah pressed her back against the wall, trying to listen. The house felt like it was holding its breath with her. Every muscle in her body was tense, waiting for the next sound, the next sign of him. And then she heard it. Crunch. The faint sound of gravel shifting outside. Her head snapped toward the side window. She crept toward it, inching closer, her heart slamming against her ribs. She pulled the curtain back with trembling fingers and peeked through. There he was, standing in her backyard, perfectly still. His tall, thin frame was silhouetted against the silver light of the moon. He wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything. He was just staring at the house. At her. Sarah's stomach twisted into knots. She dropped the curtain and stumbled back. Her mind screamed at her to do something. Call the police, scream for help, run, but her phone still showed no service, and her nearest neighbor was nearly half a mile away. Her breaths came in quick, sharp gasps. She forced herself to be logical, to think like the nurse she was. Panic would get her killed. She needed to stay quiet, stay hidden, and wait him out. Maybe he'd leave if he thought she wasn't home. She crouched low, pressing herself against the cabinets, gripping the poker tighter. Seconds crawled by like hours. She risked another glance toward the backyard. Empty. The man was gone. Her stomach sank. She should have felt relief, but instead a deeper dread seeped into her bones. Because if he wasn't outside anymore, then where was he? Then came the sound that nearly stopped her heart. Creak. Not from outside. From inside. Somewhere down the hall. Her blood ran cold. She swore every door was locked. She had checked them herself. How could he be inside? Her legs felt like stone, but survival instincts forced her to move. She crept toward the hallway, each step as silent as she could manage. The house was too quiet, every sound magnified 100 times. And then she heard them. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate, coming from the shadows of her own hallway. The footsteps grew louder. Sarah's pulse roared in her ears as she pressed herself against the wall, gripping the fireplace poker so tightly her hands ached. Every creak of the wooden floor echoed like a drumbeat, announcing that he was inside her home. The air felt heavy, suffocating. How? How had he gotten in? She had locked the doors. She had checked the windows. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that he was here, and she was trapped. Her mind raced. The front door was too far, and she'd never make it without him seeing her. The back door? Closer, but she swore she heard the footsteps moving in that direction. Her only chance was her bedroom. She bolted, her bare feet slapping the hardwood floor. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel, each shadow reaching for her. She burst into her bedroom, slammed the door shut, and shoved a chair under the knob. Her chest heaved as she backed away, eyes fixed on the door, waiting for it to rattle. For a moment, there was silence. Then, creak, the sound of weight shifting just outside. The knob twitched once. Then again, slowly, deliberately, as though he was toying with her. Sarah pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from crying out. Her phone. She grabbed it off the nightstand, praying for a miracle. But the screen mocked her with the same cold words, no service. She wanted to throw it across the room. Instead, she shoved it into her pocket, her breathing ragged. Her eyes darted around the room for escape. And that's when she remembered the attic. Above her closet was a small hatch that led into the attic crawlspace. She had only used it once, when she first moved in, to shove some boxes up there. It wasn't much, but it was the only place she could hide. She dragged a chair to the closet, every muscle screaming at her to hurry. The doorknob jiggled harder now, the chair beneath it vibrating. Her heart felt like it would explode. She climbed onto the chair, reached up, and shoved the hatch open. Dust rained down into her hair. The second the opening was wide enough, she hauled herself up, using every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength she had. She pulled her legs in just as the bedroom door shook violently, the chair scraping against the floor. She lay flat on the wooden beams, chest pressed to the dusty boards, holding her breath. From below, she heard the sound of the door finally bursting open. The chair clattered across the room. Her heart pounded so hard she was afraid he could hear it. She pressed her hands against her mouth to keep from making a sound. Silence. For a moment, nothing. Then she heard it, footsteps inside her bedroom. Slow, unhurried, each one closer to the closet. Sarah's lungs burned as she tried not to breathe. Then, with terrifying slowness, the footsteps stopped. She risked the tiniest glance down through the attic crack. The man was there, standing in her room, his head tilted back, his eyes staring directly at the hatch. At her. Sarah's whole body shook as she lay flat against the dusty attic boards, staring down through the narrow crack. The man was there. He stood in the middle of her bedroom, his face tilted upward, his pale eyes locked directly on the hatch. It was impossible. She hadn't made a sound, hadn't moved, hadn't even breathed louder than a whisper, yet he seemed to know exactly where she was. For what felt like an eternity, he didn't move, just stood there, looking up, the silence suffocating her. Then, slowly, his lips curved into the faintest smile. And then he turned. Without a word, without a sound, he walked out of the room. Sarah's chest tightened as her brain screamed at her to run. She stayed frozen for several minutes, afraid he might come back. Finally, when her lungs burned from holding her breath, she allowed the tiniest gasp of air. The silence stretched on. No footsteps, no creaks, nothing. It was worse than noise, because silence meant she didn't know where he was. Every nerve in her body screamed to get out. She crawled across the attic, the boards groaning softly under her weight. She pressed her ear against the roofline, listening for anything. Nothing. With trembling hands, she found the small window at the far end of the attic. She shoved it open, cold night air rushing against her face. Sarah climbed out onto the sloped roof, inching along the shingles until she reached the edge. Her legs shook violently, but she didn't care. She leapt. She hit the ground hard, pain shooting up her ankle, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She ran barefoot into the street, not daring to look back. By the time neighbors found her, she was hysterical, screaming, sobbing, pounding on doors. Lights flicked on up and down the street, and someone finally pulled her inside to safety. The police arrived minutes later, sirens shattering the still night. Sarah could barely speak, her words tumbling out in gasps. She told them everything. The knocking, the voice, the man in the window, the footsteps inside her house. The officers searched her home top to bottom. They checked every door, every window, every lock. But they found nothing. No footprints outside. No sign of forced entry. No man. Except when they climbed into the attic. There, shoved into the corner, was a tattered old sleeping bag. Beside it, half-eaten food wrappers. And worse, photographs. Dozens of them. Every single picture was of Sarah, some taken through her kitchen window, some from the yard at night, some of her sleeping, completely unaware. The officers' faces went pale. The man hadn't just broken in that night. He had been living in her attic for weeks, watching her, waiting. The police promised to investigate, but the truth was brutal. Whoever he was gone. No fingerprints, no leads, no capture. To this day, Sarah still doesn't know who he was, or how long he had been in her house before she discovered him. And the scariest part? He was never caught. Somewhere out there, he's still free. And maybe, right now, he's standing outside someone else's window, whispering their name.